If the man who owns the house is caught and bound, the enemy will come in and he will loot the entire house. He will ransack this temple, strip it of everything good, cause damage. Now all it takes is to take control of their will. Take control now. Take back control. Good morning. Welcome. Thank you, Trinity family, for joining me in our morning service. I want to especially thank those of you who patronize our church, who make it possible for me to bring these sermons to you. They are indeed life-changing and in some cases life-saving. And we can only thank God for His grace upon our ministry and what we are able to share with you, and we are blessed that you are part of our family, all of you. May God bless you this morning and always. I want you to always remember that your relationship with God is not based on your affiliation, going and sitting in a building, following somebody, singing or praising. Your relationship with God, your strength in God is based on your relationship, your personal relationship with the Lord. Nobody can give you that. No matter where you are, no matter where you go, no matter who you speak to. That is a personal choice. And when your relationship and bond with God is strong, He will open your ears to receive everything that you need to give yourself here a full life with all the knowledge that you need, with all the impetus that will take you through the valleys, over the hills and bring you to the other side. But first and foremost, you must make a choice that your inner strength, your life, your marriage, your work, your home, is not based on anything else but your personal relationship and walk with Jesus Christ. I've been trying to foster that atmosphere upon your life and transferring knowledge of creation and God's wonder into your spirit, so it will give you something to hold on to, something to understand that a creator made you, and your job is to be a worshiper of that creator, starting a relationship with God. And I believe many of you can do that right now today, if you haven't already. If you go into, I want to take, let's say you're living 5,000 years from now and everybody is dead and you're all alone. And you walk into an abandoned building, and that building has been, let's say, a cave. And you go into this cave and there's nobody else around. And you see a washing machine there. Remember, you're living 5,000 years away from now. When you see that washing machine, perhaps you also look on the walls and you see carvings of animals or whatever else, writings. When you look at the evidence in that cave, would you not logically perceive that there was somebody there before you that put that washing machine there, that drew on the wall? Or would you just think that those things just appeared, happened to be there by chance. And I think the logical answer is that yes, there must have been somebody that came into this cave, and there must have been somebody that put that machine there. There must have been somebody that drew on that wall, because those things just can't happen. With the same train of thought, I want you to look at your being, who you are. Look at creation, the natural things, and think. And it amazes me that intelligent people can be so dumb as to think that those things just appeared and that nobody put them there. I mean, look at you, how well you designed. Look at the eyes and its function. The face, the nose, the breathing apparatus, inside and outside of you. When you look at that being, you have to realize that somebody put that being here. Somebody was responsible for making that machine. And I'm calling you loosely a machine. Because if you can logically assume that that washing machine 5,000 years from now was put there by somebody, then logically you have to know that you being here is not an accident. Somebody put you here. And to reaffirm that strength you have in your belief in God, I mentioned this. So knowing the logic of it all, I want you to bend your knees always and strive to have that one-on-one relationship with God, not based on singing a hymn to Him, on clapping, but based on a real, down-to-earth, person-to-person relationship with God. I want you to find that place. And then, when I minister to you His true thinking, whatever I speak through my lips, I seek His face diligently. And when that message that I speak come through to you, then and then only will you be able to have a reception for Him. But it starts with your personal relationship. Then you will know right from wrong. You will know if God is real, and you will know the shortfalls and pitfalls of your life. And so you'll be able to understand and soak in everything I'm sharing. So I base whatever I said on the premise that who I'm speaking to right now has had that personal relationship with God. This morning I'm going to be speaking to you about, well, the wonder of our creation, of who we are. And as I pick the details of how God made you, your awe supposed to be elevated. You're supposed to look at the human being with awe, looking at his divinity. I'm going to talk to you about almost the very smallest part of you. And I mentioned this before. Some of our young people are in med school, might appeal to you as well. I'm going to talk about how your cells function. And as you go, you'll realize why I'm doing this. You have, as I mentioned to you, between 30 and 70 trillion cells in the human body. These are so minute, obviously you can only see them through microscopes, very powerful microscopes. But every part of your being is made up of cells. Liver cells, heart cells, blood cells, brain cells. All these things are all cells. And put together they form your organs, your blood, and all the things that make you. But in order for these cells to function, for your body to function as a whole, these cells need to communicate with one another inside your body. And here is where we start to zero in on the wonder of God. But let's go step by step. I first want you to have a look at this video clip for just over 2 minutes. And then I'll begin to share with you the details of what we are seeing. Watch this, please.
question for you. Have you ever played the game Telephone? You know, the game where someone whispers something to someone, and then that person whispers it to someone else, and then that person whispers it to someone else. And by the time you get through everyone playing, the original message is all messed up. I used to kind of dread that game. Most people seem to like it, but somehow whenever it reached me, the message was always really messed up, so I felt like I was spreading nonsense. Well, either that or it was me all along that misheard it. Anyway, the game is all about communication and how things spread. Communication is incredibly important, not just for us, but for the things that we are made up of, like our cells. Cells make up all living things, and while they don't talk in the way that you and I do, it's important for their messages, their signaling, to be transmitted and received appropriately. Multicellular organisms need their many cells to be able to work together to carry out functions. Just consider all the cells working together in one of your organs, like your heart, for example. We're going to be talking a lot about receptors. A receptor is a molecule, such as a protein, where a signal molecule can bind. One place you can find receptors is on the surface of a cell membrane. When a signal molecule binds the receptor, amazing things can happen. The receptor might start activating another molecule for an action to happen. The receptor often changes its shape slightly in the process. More about that later. So, receptor, signal molecules. The signal molecule can be considered a ligand, a fancy term which basically means that it's the smaller molecule that binds to a typically larger molecule. Signal molecules can be a variety of things, such as gas molecules or hydrophobic biomolecules like lipids or hydrophilic biomolecules like some kinds of proteins. But ligands are generally smaller than the receptors they bind. Ligands and receptors can have a very specific fit as well. Let's talk about the general sequence of cell signaling. First, reception. Typically, a signal molecule binds a receptor. Second, transduction. The receptor gets activated by this binding. This often means the receptor will change its shape. It could even involve a whole series of molecules changing their conformation in something called a signal transduction pathway. This can amplify the original signal. Third, response. There's some kind of response that is going to happen. A portion of DNA that is found in the nucleus getting transcribed, for example, that's a type of response.
Now, we've gone through a few things that we've just seen. Now let's go into the details. We learned about something called a ligand. And a ligand is basically a message carrier that carries a message from one cell to the other cell. Then we learned about a receptor. In order for the other cell to receive that message, they have to have in that cell a receptor. Sometimes the receptor is inside the cell and the message, the ligand, comes in through the cell membrane. But most times it sits on the surface and it doesn't allow the ligand, the message carrier, to come inside. You know, like Mr. D doesn't come inside your house, he stands by the gate and gives you what you ordered. And this is how the ligand works. It carries the message, but at the door of the other cell, you'll find the receptionist. And that's called a receptor, it receives. But for each ligand, there has to be a specifically shaped receptor. You can't have a round ligand and have a square receptor, it won't fit. And so we learned about that. Then we learned about transduction. Once that message comes in, once the ligand enters into the cell, or the message carrier transfers the message into the cell, the cell undergoes transduction. That means it converts the message into action. The cell says, oh, is this what the message is? That cell is asking me to do something, so I need to do what they're asking, in simple terms. And that leads to a response. And so those are the things we learned. The ligand, the receptor, the transduction process, the changing of the shape of the receptor, and then action, the response. And that message is taken directly to the DNA of the cell, where your spirit lives. And so if anything has to enter that cell, it can only enter if the cell allows it, and then that message will come right to the DNA to make a protein or whatever the other cell wants it to do. Now, we'll watch the second part of that video. Watch closely.
Let's say we have a steroid hormone that travels through the cell's semi-permeable membrane. Remember, that would mean the steroid hormone is our signal molecule, our ligand. Once inside the cell, it binds to a protein receptor within the cell. Now, the protein receptor is active. The protein receptor travels into the nucleus where the cell's DNA is found. This protein receptor binds to DNA and is involved in getting transcription of a certain gene going, which eventually can be used to produce a specific protein. This is an example of signaling inside the cell, simplified a bit. Now, in the example, the receptor was inside the cell, a cytoplasmic receptor. But it doesn't have to be. Receptors are frequently part of the cell's membrane surface. If a receptor is sitting outside of the cell membrane surface, then the ligand doesn't have to come in. In fact, there could be properties of the ligand that may not allow it to pass through the membrane.
Now, the type of ligands, message carriers, that do not enter a cell, not allowed to enter the cell, are hydrophilic. They call hydrophilic. The names are not important, just the principle. Hydrophilic ligands are not allowed to enter inside the cell. And the sum of the types of hydrophilic ligands are things like neurotransmitters and insulin. These are just two examples. But I'm going to take these two examples and I'm going to show you how important the receptor and the ligand are for receiving these transmitters. Remember, these are hydrophilic, they're not allowed inside. The receptor comes to the surface of the cell and then it receives the message and then it goes into the cell and does what it wants the cell to do. So let us look at insulin, for example. We start with that. Now, you know, diabetics, they need insulin. Now, insulin, remember, is a ligand. It has to go to all the cells. Now, here's what it, let me just simplify this for you so you understand it, especially those who are diabetics. Now, your insulin is made in the pancreas. Some of you that did biology in school, you would have heard of islets of Langerhans. That's where the insulin is made, in the pancreas. Now, when the pancreas makes this insulin, this ligand, the insulin has to take a message to most of the cells in your body. So they produce this insulin and they send it out with a message to all the other cells in your body. And all the cells need to have a receptor for that insulin. Otherwise, the insulin can't go and give that message to the cells. And in diabetics cases, the shape of the receptors are not able to receive the insulin because the shapes have been damaged. So the insulin goes to the surface of the cell, but it can't go in, it can't send the message. That's one type of diabetes where the shape is all wrong. And so this insulin just floats around and cannot enter the cells to transfer the message. What is the message it wants to send? It wants to tell the cell there's an excess amount of sugar. Glucose, they use that term. You know, like for example, when you eat food or eat an ice cream or a cake, the potatoes like got a lot of starch and it turns to sugar and it's glucose and it's in your blood. Now, it sends a message, the islets of Langerhans, the pancreas, sends a ligand, a message carrier, to send that insulin and tell the cells, listen, we need you to open so that you can take all the sugar that's in the blood and bring it into the cells so the cells can be energized. But because the receptor is damaged, that message can't go into the cells. So what happens is that because the cells are not getting the message, the cells are remaining closed, all the sugar is now floating in the blood. That's why they call it high blood sugar, because the cells are not opening up and reducing the amount of sugar that's in the blood. The second message the insulin is carrying to the cell is to stop making glucose, because that's what cells do. When a person is, continuously your cells make glucose, protein that can come in and give you strength. And so your cells keep, because they never get the message, they keep making glucose and they're releasing it into the blood. So because they didn't get the message to stop making glucose and to take glucose out of the blood, they just keep making glucose and sending it into the blood. So whatever food you eat, the cells are making even more and sending it out. So your blood sugar now is spiking, all because the receptor in your cells is damaged. Now, those of us who are continuously suffering because of this problem, we need to listen very carefully, so not only can you help yourself, but prevent any, you see, because life takes a toll on you, and you're so busy working, earning, supplying, supporting the family, making sure the food is cooked on time, the children are fed. You forget about how you are made. And because you forget, sometimes you don't even know anything. So ignorance also plays a role in your suffering. And then you start to have problems. And then you take these problems to God. And you want to try and solve these problems. Because let me just put it this way. Once you start to create a sickness in your body, because you don't know about these things, that sickness becomes part of you. It gets buried in your genes. So later in life, when you have children, those children already are predisposed to have the sickness you have. All because you didn't know what you needed to do when you were younger. And so you start to have problems, and you take it in prayer, and you go to church and you want people to pray for you and all these things. But it all starts because there was a lack of understanding and a lack of knowledge. And so this is one of the reasons to help prevent you from problems developing in your life, from sitting in a hospital queue, from allowing your children to inherit the same disease and sickness like you, so that you have to sit with them in the hospital, you have to buy medication. So I'm giving you this stuff so that I can reduce the load of life on your life. The load of life is heavy. If we neglect it, it's going to get heavier. So I'm easing the burden for you to take that away, that problem away from yourself that might await you in a couple of years. So listen very carefully. So what causes the shape, the receptor shape, not to receive the ligand, the insulin? What causes the shape to get damaged? And one of the things that science has discovered is that excess weight, but not just everywhere, in the stomach. And because I never knew these things, I suffered consequences. But starting to know the things about God, so how I can bring it into correction. You remember I read to you a while ago, a few months ago I think it was, where Satan was talking to Jesus and he wanted him to jump from the high building, from the temple top. And Jesus says there are principles of the spirit and there are principles of the earth. You cannot expect the principles of the earth not to fulfill itself. So if you go into a dangerous situation, don't expect not to get harmed, because the physical laws take effect. You have to use wisdom. And so I'm giving you this. Now, in that article, they say excess weight. Experts believe obesity, especially too much fat in the abdomen and around the organs called visceral fat, is a main cause of insulin resistance. So your cells are resisting insulin. They're resisting the ligand because the shape is damaged. A waist measurement of 40 inches or more for men, 35 inches or more for women is linked to insulin resistance. So this is how damage is caused. Researchers used to think that fat tissue was only for energy storage. However, studies have shown that belly fat, when you have fat in the belly, it makes hormones and other substances that can contribute to chronic, that means long-term or long-lasting inflammation in the body. Inflammation may play a role in insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, and cardiovascular disease. Now, one of the hormone types that is made inside you, because your belly fat makes hormones. One of the hormones that is made by your belly fat is called triglyceride. We'll read about it just for a moment. Belly fat also releases high levels of triglyceride in the bloodstream. This increases the production of inflammatory hormones, which also causes insulin resistance. Triglycerides are dangerous things, beloved. They cross the blood-brain barrier and induce central leptin and insulin receptor resistance. So your receptor in the cells is rejecting insulin because it is affected by inflammation, damaged by inflammation caused by triglycerides, which can even go through to your brain. It goes through the blood-brain barrier, and that is anything that goes through that barrier is dangerous not only to your physical health but to your mental health, your thinking ability. Triglycerides cross the blood-brain barrier rapidly, are found in human cerebrospinal fluid, and induce central leptin and insulin receptor resistance, decreasing satiety and cognition. So in other words, it makes you feel hungry when you're not hungry, satiety, and it affects your cognition, your reasoning, your thinking ability. Mayo Clinic also suggests when you eat, your body converts any calories it doesn't need to use right away into triglycerides. The triglycerides are stored in your fat cells. Later, hormones release triglycerides for energy between meals. So just as a guide, when you're looking at a product that you want to buy for eating, consuming, check the calories and try and burn it out if you're eating a lot. But also most important for sugar people with sugar problems, is to check carbohydrate level. Forget about the sugar. Look at carbohydrates. If it's high, now just between you and I, your carbohydrate intake for diabetes 2 to reverse it, is to have no more than about 50 to 60 milligrams of carbohydrates a day. You have 2 slices of bread, that's about it. A little bit more for the day. So watch that so that you can take care of yourself. And why? So that you don't go get sick and then ask God all the time, because it points to ignorance of trying to take care of yourself. So while you're trying to get the world in its place, make sure this vessel that God gave you is well looked after. It's a temple. You know, I just wish somebody would have told me stuff when I was younger so that I could have taken better care. Now, here's something very interesting. The results of most studies with food, you know, the thing we talk about, indicate that they may cause some common toxic effects such as hepatic, pancreatic, there comes your insulin problem. Renal, there's your kidney problem. Or reproductive effects, and may alter the hematological, biochemical, and immunologic parameters. So it buggers your immune system, your biochemical signal system. It even damages the kidneys, so that's why you start to go to the loo very often. Now, just going a little further with that, the stuff, changed organisms, contain fatty acids, triglycerides, and certain chemicals that can only be detected suitably by qualitative ways. Now, everything that the cabal wants to put into the world leads to more sickness, as you can see from scientific journals. Now we go to another hydrophilic ligand, another message carrier, which is neurotransmitters. And here is where I want you to understand carefully. If you have a problem where your cells have a problem receiving neurotransmitting or transmitter with important messages, and your cell receptors are damaged, here is what happens. Medical news tells us it results in anxiety, depression, changes in blood pressure, changes in heart rate, low blood sugar, hypo or hypoglycemia, migraine headaches, problems sleeping. These are the effects of deficiency. And one of the reasons is that one of the neurotransmitters that the brain, for example, the neurotransmitters in the brain cannot reach all the brain cells. One of the neurotransmitters is epinephrine. It's important to keep the stability of the head, to be cognitive, to have logic, to think clearly. And so epinephrine cannot get to your brain cells because the receptors are damaged. And most of these receptors get damaged because of things like, not completely, but things like overweight, belly fat. So it results in all those symptoms. Because you can't recognize things, understand things, comprehend things. The reason for that is because your cells there, the receptors in those brain cells are damaged. They cannot receive these neurotransmitters that are important for cognitive functioning. Now, these symptoms of migraines and bad sleeps and all these things, they resemble very closely or completely, I would say, a symptom of being possessed. And so we're going to look at that just now. And this is one of the reasons why when people don't really listen or don't want to listen to advice, even when you talk to them and try and guide them, the message doesn't get through because they don't have cognition. Because epinephrine, they're depressed, they can't listen to you. And here is why, when you've tried all things possible, is to start to have a relationship with God. Because He is the only one who made those cells, who can reverse so that you can begin to understand Him, know what He's saying, take that advice and make it work for you, whatever the case in your life might be. Just quickly take a look at this clip.
Well, realize that your body processes that keep you alive rely on your cell's ability of cell signaling. From the regulation of your heartbeat to the hormone signals traveling long distances in your body to the way neurons in your brain communicate, your multicellular self needs cell signaling. But there are many disorders where cell signaling does not work as it should, and so understanding all of the complexities of cell signaling is critical in order to find ways to treat them. Cancer is an example of a disease that can involve body cells with problems in cell signaling. We mentioned autocrine signaling. A cancer cell could have a problem where it produces too much of its own growth factor, causing excessive cellular division. Cancer cells can also have many other cell signaling difficulties where they do not function like normal healthy cells. Or another example, there are also pathogens, such as viruses or bacteria, that can take advantage of cell signaling. Consider the HIV, which targets helper T cells. Helper T cells are important immune cells in your body, and they have something called a CD4 receptor on their surface. That receptor is so important so that helper T cells can communicate with other immune cells. But as mentioned in our video, HIV targets that CD4 receptor. It is because of the binding to that receptor on helper T cells that attach and infect the cell in the first place, a fact that continues to be researched for treatment options.
Now there's certain things I don't want to say, but I'm going to play this next part. I'm going to leave that on your screen so you can read it and understand it. Just for a few moments. But you see, all this I'm telling you is not in vain or just to give you medical knowledge of who you are. It leads me to some way. But before I go to that someplace, I'm going to talk about something called neuron signaling in the brain. There's a government medical website that tells us this. It is now well established that there are complex interactions between brain and pancreatic islets. Cells within the islets are stimulated by the central nervous system parasympathetic or sympathetic outputs to alter the secretion of peptide hormones, including insulin. So let me put this correctly. When there's high blood sugar in your body, the pancreas has to get a message. It also has receptors. The brain sends a message to the pancreas, the islets of Langerhans, to make insulin, because the brain senses that there's too much blood sugar going into the blood, and so the message goes to the pancreas to make that insulin. And what if the receptor in the pancreas is damaged, so it can't receive the message from the brain? Now the pancreas cannot make insulin because it never got the message from the brain. And so you have less insulin in your blood, while the receptors of the cells may be good. The problem is there's not enough insulin coming out of the pancreas, because what the brain is asking it to do, it cannot receive the ligand, the message. And so here is something important for you to note. So these are the two reasons why people are diabetic. One, the brain sends a signal, a ligand, to the pancreas, and the pancreas receptor is not receiving the message. It's damaged. Or the second reason is, when it makes the insulin, the cells that it's speaking to cannot receive that message. So these are the reasons, just so that you have an idea. So it looks like for every function in the body, the brain is the boss, and that's what it looks like. The brain decides there's a harmful bacteria that's come into this body. It then sends a signal to make more white blood cells, and the white blood cells start to pour out, but everything is centered around the central nervous system or the brain. And so, if you look on the outside, it seems like the main computing power for this being is up in the brain. And this is the reason why we need to have cognitive ability. But all these things happen on a subconscious level. While you're sleeping at night, all these things are going on because it's an automated process that God has put in place. Now I want to show you even more evidence of the brain being or seeming like the boss. Now, your eyes have photoreceptors. The message that comes in, light, photons carry a message of what a word looks like. So when you look at a word with your eyes, light bounces photons on it. Photons is a ligand. It's a message carrier. It goes and your eyes have a receptor. I'm not going to go too much detail, but it has a receptor that receives the ligand. And then the message is taken and transduced. It's called phototransduction. It's transcribed into energy. And that energy is turned into many forms of chemical energy and biochemical energy, and it goes back as an electrical signal to a part of the brain that can understand what you have just read. Even it happens with the ears. Now let's quickly read this so we get a proper understanding. Photoreceptor. The photoreceptor is a specialist neuron capable of performing phototransduction, by which light is converted into electrical signals which are then transmitted from neuron to neuron. So from cell to cell, inside your brain, the message travels till it reaches that part. One cell has to open, the message goes. The other cell has to open, and it goes like a chain reaction till it reaches the part of your brain that actually sees. Another website talks about the ears. In the cochlea, the snail shell-shaped structure in the inner ear, about 4,000 specialized sound receptors called inner hair cells convert vibrations. That means what you hear with your ears, as I'm talking to you, it's happening right now. Those words are going to hair cell receptors. And they convert it into electrical impulses that are sent directly to the brain for interpretation. This is how microphones work. The one I'm talking into, it's got a transducer. It converts the sound into electrical energy, which goes to a sound disk and then converted again and moved to a speaker where there's a transducer that brings its sound back out. These principles of the earth, even your computer works like that. The microphone works like that. They've stolen those ideas from the building of a human body. So God's design, as I told you, the computer is made after it. Everything electrical is made after God's design. So it's made of a ligand, a message carrier, a message inside that carrier. It's made of a receptor. It's made of a transducer, and then action. So what we saw in the beginning is how the world decided to design things of a technical nature. It's all done because they saw the design of this human body. Magnificent. The devil cannot be original. He has to take designs from God. So what receives instruction, gives instruction? The boss seems to be the brain, doesn't it? To me, this is fascinating. I hope that you get fascinated by God's grand design. I'm going to talk to you about a person, and I want, when you listen to me talking, I need you to understand that the person I'm talking about is a spiritually very dangerous human being. And in no uncertain terms do I want you or recommend that you follow anything that this man says or does because you think that is going to help you. Just wanted to lay that out. There's a world record holder called Wim Hof. He's a Dutchman. He's called the Iceman. He's now a motivational speaker, extreme athlete, noted for his ability to withstand low temperatures. He previously held a Guinness World Record for swimming under ice and prolonged full body contact with ice. And he holds a record for a barefoot half marathon on ice and snow. He attributed these feats to his Wim Hof method, a combination of frequent cold exposure, breathing techniques, and meditation. An article from the Science Explorer says, the Iceman controls his body temperature and immune system with his mind. Now, I want you to understand this, that it didn't say brain, it said mind. And there is a distinct difference, because the mind is the human spirit and the brain is part of the body. The human spirit is the mind. The mind is not a physical thing. The mind is intangible. It is the spirit of a man, the will of a man. And so the headline seems to suggest now that he can control his body temperature and his immune system by his spirit through his will. Let's continue. Wim Hof's breathing and mind control techniques have been scientifically proven to enable subjects to regulate their nervous systems and immune systems with their spirits, their will, their minds. Let's take a look at this video clip.
My vision is that we are now able to get 100% control over our own brain. We are able to defy inflammation, actually the cause of disease. And then we will change mental health care. With natural ways, we are able to outbalance any hormonal or mental disorder. I tell you once again, any mental disorder.
Now, inasmuch as this man has gained world fame, it is important to note that many people have died trying to emulate these things. This guy's meditation, which I hesitate to show you any of, is like a trance. It's like taking magic mushrooms. It takes your spirit out of your body into a spirit realm. It's like a seance. And this mannerism, according to him, is enabling his spirit to actually physically control his body temperature, his immune system, his nervous system, or whatever system that you can't normally have access to. By doing these breathing and meditating techniques. This is like yoga. This is like when you put yourself in a trance, you're not here. Your spirit, your mind is gone somewhere else. And this gave him the power to do these feats that look unachievable to a human being. So we're getting to understand using this as an example that the brain is not really the boss. The real boss is the mind. And Jesus tried to tell us this in many ways, but I'm not going to get too much there now. I'm going to save that for a special time for you next week. But I just wanted you to understand the principles. The mind, the will, the spirit of a man is able to tell the brain, or should be able to tell the brain, what to do in certain circumstances. So it can instruct the brain, and the brain need to instruct the rest of the body, and that's the order of events. This is, I'm opening up a world to you so that you can understand the power of your will, the power of your mind, the ability God gave your spirit to rule this temple. He didn't leave it in a mechanical part called the brain. He left it in your hands. And when I say your, I mean the spirit within you. If you take control of your own spirit, you'll be able to control your brain, your thinking. And your brain will follow what your mind tells it to follow. Some of you might not see results straight away and think it doesn't work. No. I want you to be able to tell your brain, let's put it this way. If you are right-handed and desperately you want to be able to use both hands, you have to, your will now has to tell the brain, I am going to use this left hand, you make it happen. And after a short space of time, this happens. Let's say you want to get a driver's license. Your brain doesn't tell you that. Your brain just is a computer. It processes information. If your will tells you, I'm going to get my driver's license, your brain follows the pattern. Even when you're learning to drive, your will is, I'm going to drive this automatic or this manual car. And at first you struggle, but it becomes automated. Your brain accommodates what your will desires. So if you are willing, if you really want something, and you push for it hard enough, meaningful, something spiritual, something that will change who you are. If you desire, my partner left me, I will no longer be depressed about this. I lost my business, so what? I lost somebody stole something, somebody spoke about me, so what? If your will desires it, your brain will carry it out. But if your will becomes depressed, if your will loses hope, if your will chooses to feel sorry for itself, then your brain will follow the same pattern. It will cause a problem, sending ligands to parts of your body. Then you start to get depressed, triglycerides will form, belly fat, all these things that your brain will start to react. Your brain reacts to the true boss, the will of man. Can you imagine if your spirit has power over your mind and over your brain and your whole body? Imagine if that spirit is overtaken, is overcome, is hijacked. In other words, if your mind, if your brain is hijacked by a foreign spirit, that thing will come and create a hell inside your body. You remember Jesus faced a demon-possessed man. Let's read some part of it. Then they sailed to the country of the Gadarenes, which is opposite Galilee. And when he stepped out of the land, there met him a certain man from the city who had demons for a long time. And he wore no clothes, nor did he live in a house, but in tombs. You saw? It took control of his mind, took away his cognitive abilities. It stopped ligands from going, so he didn't feel cold, he didn't feel shame, he didn't feel embarrassed, he didn't feel anything. Everything the brain was, you can see the brain was hijacked. And then it seized him. And he was kept under guard, bound with chains and shackles. And he broke the bonds and was driven by the demon into the wilderness. So the demon made him Gave him so much of power. So your muscles have power. Your hands have power. It is the will of the spirit of darkness, that evil spirit, those demonic forces, their will hijack the brain to give the hands power to break the bonds. And what happened? He lost control of his cognition, his understanding, reasoning. He lost control of his faculties. He manipulated his own strength so he can break chains. This is the power of the will. And if the will is hijacked by an outside spirit, then there's going to be havoc, not just inside your body, but I told you that your heartbeat generates atmosphere around you. That too will cause problems. All this devastation that happens inside your body or improvement is all because of the ability for one cell to talk to the other, cell signaling. But the danger comes when the real boss, not the brain, the mind, the will, the spirit of man, is hijacked, is bound. And this is what Jesus says. If the man who owns the house is caught and bound, the enemy will come in and he will loot the entire house. He will ransack this temple, strip it of everything good, cause damage that is going to be very hard to repay. Now, all it takes for people who are already experiencing these negative things of the body is to take control of their will. Take control now. Take back control and make a decision. Let the will make a decision. This is no longer going to be anything to be debated. I have made a commitment, I made a decision, and this is how it's going to be. And you find that everything transforms around you. No, I'm not going to feel sorry for myself anymore. Make a decision. And your body, your brain will accommodate you, and it will send signals to every cell, and the cells will accommodate you because they're all answerable to you. Your mind, your will, your spirit. They all. This entire being is in the hands of your spirit, including the brain. I want you to take back control now. So listen, the brain gets messages from the doctor about your condition, and you hearing it. It's going from one hair cell to the next hair cell, converted into electrical impulse, and it's going to the brain, and the brain is receiving it. You're seeing results with your eyes that are not good news. And when it's going in there, it's turning the brain inside out and making it anxious and making it cause your heartbeat to get breathed. Now your will can override it. Your will can say, no, I'm making a decision. This is not how my brain is going to react. And you come to, when you are in God, you might break down for a day or 2 days or something, but when you are in God, God will be a constant reminder, the boss is you. You decide. So, the devil will use cell signaling that will come in from the outside. There's so many things around you that can turn the mind into a negative machine upon your body. It can send signals. Your brain can send cell signals to every part, which causes damage. And fear is one of those things that cause damage. And God is saying to you, the devil will put around you people who bring you down, who speak negative about you. It's going into those hair follicles, the hair receptors there, and it's transferred, going to your brain. No. When you hear that, you tell your brain, there is no way I'm accepting that to bring the spirit down. You do your job how God made you. And when you start to talk to your brain, when your will starts to talk, you see a transformation on the inside and out. Your body can heal itself. It has the ability, but it can only do it if you tell the central nervous system, the brain, if you talk to it and tell it what to do. It might take a while because there's no magic wand. Everything is a practical thing that must be done. And the more you talk to your spirit, the devil will bring more things against you, more people against you, more circumstances will turn sour because your strength is being tested, the strength of your will. But you stand firm no matter what comes in through here or through here, your eyes, you reject its effect to the brain. And you start to practice. And I'm going to share with you some deep things next week. Make sure that you are here and you understand. Put a note. Those of you that are not subscribed to our channel, please do it now. We have 2 channels. Subscribe to both. Just in case we don't broadcast on one, we do it on the other. Send this message out to many people as you can. Let's bring God to the people. So I don't want you to meditate and do all these yoga things to get a hold of your spirit. No, your spirit is there. You're thinking with it. All you have to do, sometimes you find a quiet place to pray, to get in touch with God, to get in touch with yourself, but do not go into meditation with sounds and music and humming and all sorts of yoga trances, because those things will allow other entities to come in and they will control you. Oh, next week you got to be here. You got to watch this. You know, one of my very faithful members who's been with me for many years has sent me this message about her 2 children, that what the school is doing to them. I want you to look and read this message. You see, this is what the devil and his agents want. They want to control the cell signaling from your brain to your body. They want to cause damage. And they want to hack the human body. We heard this demonic person speaking about this. We'll just remind you of what he said.
All of us are flooded by enormous amounts of information and distraction. I mean, this is the most distracted age in history. And to really understand the world all your life, you need some peace and quiet. You need some sanctuary from this enormous flood. And for me, meditation provides this sanctuary. Sometimes people try to meditate to have some unique experience of bliss or of peacefulness or whatever. That's not the point. The really big thing is hacking human beings. To hack human beings, you need a lot of biological knowledge, a lot of computing power, and especially a lot of data. If you have enough data about me and enough computing power and biological knowledge, you can hack my body, my brain, my life. You can reach a point when you know me better than I know myself. And once you reach that point, and we are very close to that point, then democracy, the free market as we have, and actually all political systems, also authoritarian regimes, we have no idea what happens once you pass that point.
You know, cell signaling. They wanted, you know, that poke they were trying to give everyone, poison. It was trying to bluff, trying to evade, trying to con its way into each cell so it can access the DNA, and they've been successful. They've entered many people's DNA, and those people's characters were changed because the DNA is where your spirit, your mind lives. That's where it lives. And they tried to hack it. And this man told us they were trying to hack it. And they'll try in all different methods, but the secret is, in order to get access to this temple, they have to hack this human spirit. And it's based right there in the center of the DNA. They target it. They don't want the cells to receive the right message. And they want to cause that obstruction. They will cause many people to start meditating. They'll push this agenda of yoga. They'll cause all sorts of things with music, meditation, singing, all these sorts of things. And I want you to be very aware. Now, in order to get through to many Christian people who are aware of these things, they have to trick you. And next week we're going to learn more about that. We're going to dig deep. And I pray that you stay with me. God bless you, and let me pray with you. Let us pray together. Heavenly Father, I thank you that you've given us insight into how you made us. That, Lord, we are not going to willy-nilly allow the enemy to hijack us, to be influenced by outside voices, to be influenced by outside messages, by anything that happens to our life on earth. We will protect who we are, that you made us to be, at all costs. No matter what physical pain we have to go through, but we'll stand with you always, Father. Cover now your children with your precious blood. Keep every child in the palm of your hand, precious they are. In Jesus' name. And everybody agreed with me and said, Amen. May God bless you this week. Have yourselves a fantastic week ahead. God bless you. See you next week.